So there's three things to know about music theory. That's all. But it takes 9 years to get to know them. Let me check my levels. So we have notes. And that's a single tone. Just one tone is a note. Ha 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 ha. Those are all tones. If you replace the T and the N in the word notes, you get tones. And that's the same thing. We think of tones as something that you can bend, more like pitch, as opposed to the notes which are fixed pitch, ha, ha, ha. So if we talk about like a violin, then we'll talk about tone as opposed to a piano or a guitar, which would be notes. And then we have intervals. Inter, in between, vols, values, and that's two notes. Played simultaneously. Two notes played simultaneously. Simultaneously means at the same time. Those are intervals. So if I know certain things about intervals, I know I can compose music because I know what to do to get the sound that I want to hear. And then we have chords. Chords are 3 or more notes, and that's it. We don't have anything other than that, at least vertical wise. Three or more notes played simultaneously. Simultaneously means at the same time. We have notes, intervals, and chords. So I can start here. Notes. If I just want to sit down and compose some music, I could just kind of start with the note. Say, we'll just pick the key of C. Then I can go to intervals. 2 notes at a time. Then I can go to chords. Ya da da da, ya da da, ya da da. Because I understand how music works. I can do whatever I want to do. So I've been doing it for a while. Chords are 3 or more notes. So we have notes, intervals, and chords. And today we're going to look at intervals in depth. And it's going to get involved. It's very, I don't want to say complicated, but it's involved. We'll draw a ledger line and another. Oh, forget that. I forgot. We have to define something. We have to define the word ordinal. ordinal, Ordinal. It's like calculus class. Ordinal is the numeric part of something that has a number and a non-number. Numeric part of something that has a number and a non-number. Now, of course, if you're a mathematician, everything is numbers. So what does that mean? So I buy a ticket to the theater and I have seat... All right, this marker's not working. If I buy a ticket to the theater and I have seat 24D. The ordinal is 24. That's it. Let's say I have an airline ticket and I'm in seat 3A. Maybe that's the window seat. The ordinal is 3. Let's say I play an interval. We'll pick a different one. A major third. Major third. Capital M means major. The 3 is the ordinal. It just means number. Just means the number. It's a fancy way of saying number. The intervals contain ordinals and a characteristic that describes the ordinal. So there's going to be a word. Intervals come from the piano in music theory. That's just kind of the way it has to be. That's not the way music really works, but that's the way we structured it because piano has white keys and black keys. The other instruments don't have white keys and black keys. Cello, violin, guitar, flute, they don't have white keys and black keys on those instruments. The only way to actually see what's going on in music theory is to look at a piano or a keyboard. So we have the white keys and the black keys, and so you can see the relationships very clearly. You can't do that very easily on a violin. There are relationships you can see easily on a violin, but it's not all of them very easily, not like the piano. The rule for intervals is, there's a rule for intervals, and this is the rule for intervals. And at first you may be like, what does that even mean? But as we go through it, it will begin to make sense. So the rule, R-U-L-E. And the great thing about this rule is there are no exceptions. The rule of intervals in music. The rule of musical intervals. And the rule is I need a black. I'm going to grab a black marker. Excuse me for a moment. The rule is beautiful. The ordinal where's my purple? of an interval is determined by and only by the white keys on a keyboard instrument on the piano. That's the rule. Now you may be looking up and saying, I have no clue what that means. But we'll worry about that as we get into it. This rule will start to come about, and it will greatly help you to understand what interval we're talking about. The ordinal of an interval is determined by and only by the white keys on the piano. So if you play the violin and you play 2 notes, and somebody says, what interval is that? We have to imagine in your mind what that would be on the piano. And then you can know what interval it is. You can't know certain intervals unless you're imagining the interval on the piano. So everybody in music has to have what are called basic keyboard skills. You have to know the keyboard layout in order to be a musician, even if you're a drummer. Now we're going to draw the ledger line. Two, 3, 4, and 5. We put a treble clef here. You can put a treble clef on your staff there. Make sure you take notes here. Let's use the key of C, since we have a rule of intervals anyway. Here's the key of C. Now if I say the key of C, I'm talking about the 7-note scale. If I say the C key, I'm just talking about one key. But if I say the C of key, if I put the word of in there, I'm talking about the whole scale. So let's begin with a unison. So we have C and C. Now that could be me singing and somebody playing the same note on the piano. Or it could be 2 instruments together or 2 pianos together. If I'm going to demonstrate it with just one piano, I'll use 2 fingers on the C key to illustrate that I'm playing 2 C's at the same time. That's called a unison. The name of this interval is called a unison. 2 of the same note sounded at the same time. Unison, U-N-I-S-O-N. We'll hang that ledger line below the staff and put 2 C's. That's a unison. The next interval would be the C with a half step above. C and D flat. A flat is a half step down. C and D flat. There's C and D flat. Has a harsh sound. And that's a second. And the ordinal is 2, the second, because D is a half step away from, and only the white keys matter. So if you take away the flat and you're talking about the D, you get C, D. That's 2. You can count to 2 on your fingers, so it's some type of second. That's the rule. Now let's look at the next interval. We have C, and then we have we use red for this, C and D natural. C and D natural. Remember the rule of intervals. To determine the ordinal, only the white keys matter, so forget about the flats and sharps. Just go C and D. 1, 2, so it's a second, some type of second. We have 2 types of seconds, so we need a way of distinguishing between the 2 types of seconds. So we're going to give it a qualifier. The narrower interval, the closer interval, we'll call it minor, and the wider interval, we'll call it major. We'll use a small m to denote minor. That's a minor second. We're going to use a capital M to denote major. I'm using colors as well to make it easier to see. That's just my thing. The colors. So we have a unison and a minor second and a major second. Next, we're beginning to learn how to speak the musical language. It gets complex quickly. It seems easy when we put it on the board like this, but it does get complex. Now we have a C and an E flat is next. And the next one after that is a C and an E natural. So the C and the E flat, the ordinal is determined by the white keys only. So forget about the sharps and the flats. You're just going to count on your fingers. C, D, and E. 1, 2, 3. So it's some type of third. I didn't mean to do that. Let me redraw. These are both thirds. That's the narrower third, and that's the wider third. And we have to have a way of distinguishing them. So the narrower third is going to be the minor third, and the wider third, we're going to call that the major third. Just like the seconds. The narrower interval is minor and the wider interval is major. So we have a minor third and a major third. Minor second, minor third, major third. The next one is a fourth. An interval of a fourth. The next four are a little bit unique. I'm going to hold off on putting the qualifier right now. I'm just going to show you what they are. So we have C to an F. We have C to an F sharp. We're just going up by half steps. We're going to the next half step each time. A C to a G flat. And then we have C to a G. These are a little bit special. They're a lot special, I suppose. This is a fourth. This is also a fourth. This is a fifth. And this is a fifth. The reason you know that's a fifth is because the second note is some type of G. It doesn't matter if it's a G flat or a G sharp or a G natural. If it's a G, remember only the white keys matter because only the white keys are named. The black keys don't have names. The white keys are A, B, C, D, F, G, and the black keys are named relative to the white keys. It's like if you're at a party and you're like, who's that guy over there? And you're like, oh, that's Joe. And then you're like, who's that guy? And you're like, oh, I don't know his name, but that's Jill's brother. Oh, okay, you know his relation to somebody else, but you don't know his name. That's like the black keys. You know their relation to the white keys, but they don't have names. So the black keys don't have names. They're relational names. Only the white keys matter when we're talking about the ordinal. So this is C, D, E, F, G, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it must be some type of fifth. This is some type of fourth. C, D, E, F. 1, 2, 3, 4. So here's the C and F sharp. Here's the C and G flat. They're exactly the same. But one of them is a fourth and one of them is a fifth, but you're playing the same note. Now you're not playing the same tones. If you were to play those on the violin, these two notes would sound slightly different because you can bend the tone. That's why we use the word tone instead of note when on a violin. Ah, 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 ah. There's a lot of space in between a half step. So if I do a portamento, there's 100 cents in between a half step, in between two tones. So the F sharp is actually higher than the G flat. And F sharp is higher than a G flat, believe it or not. G flat is a flat key, and F sharp is a sharp key. It's very high. So that you go, ah. If I were going to sing an F sharp, ah, ah, like that, I'll just play a fifth, and I sing the third. Ah. I'm actually singing higher than the piano. The F sharp. Ah. There's a strong magnetic pull to the G. The seventh scale degree is higher than it is on the piano. But since we can't change the pitch on the piano is equal temperament. But on the violin, I would be on the high side of the F sharp if I were going to the G. And that's what gives you the chills when you're playing. So the F sharp is actually higher than the G flat. Some people will say, oh, the F sharp is a G flat. No, it's not. You can say they're the enharmonic equivalents, but they are not the same note. They're not equal to each other. They are on the piano, but they're not. So we have fourth, fourth, fifth, fifth. Now, I'm just going to tell you what we call these. We won't worry too much about it right now. This is called a perfect fourth. All right? A perfect and you can't call this a minor fourth or a major fourth because we can't call this a minor fifth. They're the same keys on the piano, and it has to do with physics and waveforms, and we can get into it. We just do not have minor and major for fourths and fifths. They don't exist. So this is a perfect fifth. And while we're at it, this is a perfect unison. We do have a qualifier for the unison. Now, since we don't use major and minor for the fourths, fifths, or octaves or unisons, that's a perfect octave. We have to have some type of qualifier to say whether it's a wider interval or a narrower interval. So perfect, that's perfect. And it's a very hollow sound. You can hear that it's different from the thirds. It has to do with physics, and we'll look at that another time. It's very important. But these are called, if we go a half step up from a perfect interval, it's called augmented. Augment means to raise up. Augmented. To augment something means to raise it up. So we're going to use the term augmented. A-U-G-M-E-N-T-E-D. Augmented. As the qualifier. And there's two ways that you can write augmented. Classical musicians will usually put a plus sign. Jazz musicians will usually write A-U-G. They can also use a plus sign as well. Either a plus or A-U-G. So we can put A-U-G fourth for augmented fourth, but I'm going to use the classical notation. We'll put a plus sign there. That's an augmented fourth right there. Fourth with a plus sign. And when we do the scale degrees, we don't say scale degree 1 with a little degree symbol. We say scale degree 1 with a little hat above it. We use this symbol for diminished, the little circle. Diminished means to lower by, in music, a half step. But if somebody comes in and says, hey Johnny, you're no good, they insult me, I feel diminished, they've insulted me. So that's going to be lowered by 1. And we can do a minus, and we can do a DIM. Not the minus sign. I'm sorry, it's the degree symbol. So we have a perfect unison. Next, A flat. Oh, whoops, that's not a G, that's an A. I'm sure people watching the video were screaming at the top of their lungs, that's not a G. G natural. On the legend line where the treble clef is, the G clef. There we go, G. A flat. From a C to any type of A, inclusive, we'll count C, D, E, F, G, A, 6. This is how I do 6. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Or you could count binary 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it has to be some type of sixth. It's the lower sixth because the next one is a natural. So that's going to be the wider interval. So it's going to be the minor sixth and the major sixth. Where am I? Here we go, sixth. So you want to map these out in your head as to what these sound like. Sixth. Those are the most difficult intervals to identify. If you're taking a quiz and the instructor says, what's this interval? It's hard to know if that's a major or minor interval when you listen to it. But that's what you have to do. You have to know. So this is a minor sixth. And that's going to be a major sixth. So all our majors are in red. There's a major sixth. So you have a perfect fifth, minor sixth, major sixth. My bunny lies over the ocean. That's the major sixth. And the next one so you kind of have to do this in the key of C. The key of C is our pedagogical C for intervals. We teach the intervals. Now we have some type of seventh. That's going to be a minor seventh, Another type of seventh, a major seventh, and 8VE, which stands for octave. Perfect. So we'll use the light blue for the perfect intervals. B flat. Minor seventh. Yeah. And we have the major seventh, C to B natural. And we have a perfect octave. If it's 2 octaves up or 3 octaves up, we'll still call it an octave. So these are our intervals. So after that, if you do a minor ninth, that's really, if you bring this D flat down an octave, it's a minor second. So a minor ninth is really a minor second. A minor tenth is a minor third. A major tenth is a major third. I personally like the sound of tenths. I like minor tenths. I just like the sound of it. As opposed to just if they're. Those are beautiful. The thirds and sixths are considered the beautiful intervals. Those are sixths. Thirds and sixths. Now this minor seventh has another name. Depending on the context. Depending on the chord before and the chord after the minor seventh, it could be called a dominant seventh. We won't worry about why right now. But if we have a capital D, know that it's the dominant seventh. That's the only interval that we'll call a dominant. Yeah. That's right. So we'll say dominant D. I'm losing my purple. Dominant 7, D7. So there you have it. Unison, minor second, minor third, major third, perfect fourth, augmented fourth, diminished fifth, same thing. Perfect fifth, minor sixth, major sixth, minor seventh, or dominant seventh, major seventh. We call that the lounge interval because if you play a major seventh above a major chord, it sounds like you're in a lounge, like a cigar lounge. Even though it doesn't sound loungy at all if you just do this. Then it sounds like dinosaurs are coming and chasing you. And then the perfect octave. Now the chords are built off the intervals. So a major chord is a major third and a perfect fifth away from C. Or you can say a major third and a minor third stacked on top of one another, depending on. And so you build your chords off combinations of intervals. And once you learn what those combinations are, then you can do what you need to do. So you can understand how the chords relate to each other, and you start to learn harmony of voice leading. And you can do what you need to do. When you want to compose music, and you're thinking, oh man, how do I do that? The harmony of voice leading, which is built off of chords, which is built off of intervals, which are built off of notes, which is built off of physics, will allow you to do that. And then you put in your different compositional styles. So I can play Twinkle Twinkle Little Star a lot of different ways. Or I can do a different style. Because I know my chords. Or we can do classical music. Or, so we can do it in minor. Or we could do some kind of Russian. We could do Chopin. Or wild arpeggios. We could go to the Middle East and do Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. So forth. If you know the different scales. And that's just Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. Any questions? But if you want to listen to two black keys and you want to know what interval is this, F sharp and D flat, all right? Well, F sharp and D flat, just take away the sharps and the flats and count F, G, A, B, C, D. So the rule tells us that the ordinal is going to be 6. Now it sounds like a perfect fifth. And if you spell it F sharp, C sharp, it is a perfect fifth. But if you spell it F sharp, D flat, because of the rule of intervals, that's some type of sixth. And then you have to go and figure out which qualifier. It's either major, minor, perfect. Well, not perfect. It would be if you spell it F sharp, C sharp. It'd be a perfect fifth. But we spelled it F sharp, D flat. So it's going to be major, minor, augmented, or diminished, or dominant. And you have to figure out which one it is. And with the spelling, you have to know how to spell your chords. This is the beginning of learning how to do that. This is the musical alphabet of chords.